let's talk about this tariff debacle, right? So obviously we know Liberation Day happened. People were very upset because of the reciprocal tariffs that took place earlier this year. I personally loved it. I had a whole name for it. Most Republicans kept calling it the art of the deal, and it really needed a better name. I had a name for it earlier, like this year, but I can't remember what it was. I could not tell you. Don't make me tell you because I can't really remember. I'll have it for you guys in the comments when I do clip the whole tariff part of this conversation. But one of the things that were very noticeable in the whole tariff back and forth was that Canada was, one of these countries that were doing us harm. Canada, China. I was very surprised that they were in alignment with China, and didn't surprise me at all. Really, I guess we shouldn't be surprised. I'm just waiting for them to become North Montana. And this really just did it for me. So you guys, first of all, get in the chat and let me know, do you think that we should just, continue with these conversations with Canada without getting an apology first? Because they violated copyright laws when they decided to take on the Reagan speech, because this is how this whole thing got here. They were being disrespectful when they just took his content from the Reagan library without asking permission to use it. And then they misconstrued everything that he was saying in the speech. Now, you guys, I'm obviously conservative. I'm a huge fan of Ronald Reagan, okay? Both as his, when he was an actor, his movies. I do have Ronald Reagan movies on DVD. He was fantastic. And I just want you to know, I've been watching a couple of his speeches, and they are remarkable. When he supported Goldwater, that speech, by far my favorite. This particular content that was used in the ad was about tariffs, of course. But out of like a whole 10, 20-minute speech, they just decided to use a portion of it where they were able to, conflate, misconstrued, misrepresent what he was actually saying. And so before I go any further, you guys, I definitely want to show you guys the ad or parts of it, so that way you understand what was happening if you hadn't seen it already. So that way you know what was going on. Because when I saw that, Canada was on some stuff yet again, I thought to myself, well, their prime minister is part of the central bank. He's a central banker. I don't know why we thought we were going to get anything different from Canada, why you thought you're going to get anything different than Trudeau. If anything, you probably get worse than Trudeau. But this guy is central bank all day. So I was not going to be surprised.
Overnight, trade talks with Canada are now on ice. President Trump announced he's canceling negotiations with one of America's biggest allies over a Canadian TV ad opposing U.S. tariffs. It features an address by former President Ronald Reagan. The escalation as the president hopes to cool trade tensions further east. Jared Hill has the latest.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports.
An ad from Ontario featuring parts of an address by former U.S. President Ronald Reagan.
America's jobs and growth are at stake.
Has apparently caught the ire of President Donald Trump.
Yep.
In a social media post overnight, Trump called the ad fake, declaring all trade negotiations.
Okay, so before I let this news whole thing go on, I'm just going to read this parts of it. Okay, the Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used an advertisement, which is fake, featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs. The ad was for $75 million. They only did this to interfere with the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court and other courts. Tariffs are very important to the national security and economy of the USA. Based on their egregious behavior, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Okay, you guys, there's just like a myriad of things that have to be discussed on that regard. So first off, I listened to that speech before all of this even took place. I heard this speech. I heard what Reagan said. He had a radio show as the president of the United States because during that time, he had a conflict with Japan. Now, he did say in this speech that he did have an issue with a protectionist standpoint and people using tariffs as some kind of a patriotic, way of getting America back into its, proper glory, rightful glory, call it what you will. And he went on to say, though this is true, I kind of got to get tough with Japan. And this was the problem with the Canadian ad. He's not saying that he enjoys putting these kind of prices and these types of tariffs on foreign allies. The problem, however, is that these other countries want to take advantage of us. This is not just about trying to protect our position just because we're American, just because we don't like our allies. No, it's because you are not being fair in the trade. And that's a problem. You want free, fair trade, you're going to have to show the greatest consumers on the face of the earth that respect. And that's what President Reagan was saying in his radio show. And that is what Canada was trying to ignore. That is the biggest problem with that ad. Not only that, but they did use part of that speech without getting permission from the Reagan library. Had they done that, they would have had to make it clear this is how they intend to use the content. And Reagan's library would have said, yeah, no. Not if you're trying to make it sound like he was saying something he wasn't saying. Now, again, it does not mean that Reagan was not in the radio show saying that he supports protectionist positions when it comes to tariffs. What he was saying, however, is that tariffs need to be used if we're going to make sure we have free, fair trade across the world. You want free, fair trade, you have to show us respect. If you're not going to be respectful, then I'm going to have to get tough. He did this with Japan. I'm speaking of Ronald Reagan, and President Trump is now doing it with Canada. And now, guess what? You now have a 10% tariff because you decided to be a-holes about it. You don't get to misrepresent the speech of one of the greatest presidents in the 20th century. Okay, you don't get to do that, number one. Number two, you don't get to try to interfere with the courts in our darn country. What? I'm a little sick and tired of foreigners taking advantage and we not trying to do nothing about it. Now, President Trump is not the kind of guy to let that slide. We didn't do it with the illegals. We're certainly not going to do it with a, prime minister of another country. You guys get in the chat and let me know again. Do you think that President Trump should just forgive and forget and try to negotiate with them without an apology? Or do you think that Canada should apologize and suffer the consequences for the copyright laws? And now I feel like you should apologize for that. And then maybe we can do something that's actually reasonable. They took advantage because they thought that they could. $75 million on an ad using, Reagan's speech. You had $75 million for this ad and you didn't think to contact the Reagan library to use this speech. And then you had the nerve to misrepresent the actual facts of what he was saying. He did not say that taking these types of positions on tariffs were not necessary. He would like not having to, but if you're not going to be respectful to my country, well, then I'm going to have to get tough. That was the point. I'm not surprised that the prime minister, who is a central banker, decided to pull that kind of a stunt. Also, that way he can manipulate the courts here in the United States. So you guys get in the chat. Do you think that Canada should apologize before we even come back to the table? Because personally, you guys, just on a personal note, you don't get to be disrespectful and then think I'm just going to forgive and forget. I'm not about that life. I'm not just going to go ahead and pretend like you didn't just do or say something that wasn't totally egregious. You better apologize and you better mean it. Otherwise, we're done. I'm totally with it. Go ahead, Mr. President. We do that in real life, and it's good because he's a New Yorker. Love that because that's how New Yorkers are. Yeah, nah, you ain't about to just, push past me and not look back and apologize for doing it. Canada, piece of work. Piece of work. I'm just waiting for the day they become North Montana. I keep saying that. And, they just don't know how to act. Okay. Canada, when the tariff or the reciprocal tariffs became a debate, they were in alignment with China. Okay. Now, most people believe that China is one of our biggest was one of the biggest countries that we do trade with, when actually it's Canada and Mexico. A 10% tariff on Canada means lumber coming into the country is obviously going to be more expensive. And that goes into why the United States really needs to be more independent and have domestic production. Because back in the olden days, back in the 1800s, when we used to, put taxes on the rest of the world, tariffs, and not tax the citizens, we were independent. Okay. We had our own food. We had our own materials to build houses. We did everything for ourselves and we sold and bought among ourselves. If the rest of the world wanted to get in on the glory that was this land, they had to pay to have access to the potential of what this land had to offer, of what the people had to offer. I'm okay with that. Reciprocal tariffs, everybody's fair. You got to buy in to have access to my consumers. I think that's okay. I don't believe in free nothing. Okay. I don't believe in that. So go ahead. We can charge, make it equal, make it fair. That's okay. But you got to be respectful about it. Okay. Back in the day in the 1800s, we used tariffs because the rest of the world wanted to buy into the land itself. Today, it's about the potential. Again, it is about making sure that people are playing fair. We want fairness in our markets on the foreign scale as well here domestically. And I do think that when it comes to being respectful, being morally correct, we need to see that not only in how we do business in the United States, but how we deal with the rest of the world. If Canada doesn't want to play fair, if China doesn't want to play fair, then we're going to have to take serious actions. And President Reagan agreed. If they're not going to play nice, if they're not going to play fair, get off my block. I'm going to charge you a high tariff. That's the reality of how things are supposed to be done. President Trump understands this. One of the reasons why I voted for the guy, it's actually one of the policies I do like on his foreign stance. are the tariffs. I think it's going to do wonders for the United States. And, we'll just see how this plays out. I'm very excited to see how this goes forward. Now, again, you guys, you get in the chat. Let me know. Do you think that we should just, let this slide with Canada when they were trying to influence our courts, trying to influence the Supreme Court when it comes to the president's position on tariffs? Frankly, they need to apologize. I think that needs to be seriously discussed. You don't just get to take my president's statements and then misrepresent them. And he's not even alive anymore to defend his own position. Like, we don't have a YouTube channel to figure out these actual speeches that he actually gave. It's just ridiculous. These, central bankers, lefties,
We're tightening up the budget, no more slips, no more missing.